Hi everyone, welcome back to the Political Science Forum YouTube channel, and today, like I promised in this video, we are going to be talking about the other three theories of public policy, which are institutional theory, incremental theory, and rational choice theory. In the previous theory, we talked about the first three theory in no particular order actually, which are group theory, systems theory, and elite theory. Welcome back once again. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and let's get into it. Before we jump into the institutional theory, guys, I also wanted to let you know that I used the International Journal for Political Science, and I had also said it in the previous video, but I just want to say it by Professor Adam A. Anyebe, which is the volume 4 issue which was issued on 1st January 2018, just in case you want to take a look into it. So we'll first start with the institutional theory. And this model studies official structures and functions of government departments in an attempt to learn how policy, or rather public policy, takes shape. Public policy is authoritatively formulated and executed by institutions in government, which include the executive, the legislature, and judiciary. An institution is in part a set of regularized patterns of human behavior that persist over time and perform some significant social action. These regularized patterns are often called rules or structures and can affect decision-making and content of public policy. Rules and structural arrangements are usually not neutral in their effects and tend to favor some interest in society over others and some policy results over others. Institutional structures, arrangements, and procedures often have important consequences for the adoption and content of public policies. They provide part of the context of policy making. So guys, when it comes to the institutional theory, it actually looks at different institutions that work together in government, and I gave you an example of the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And sometimes these institutions have to work together so that they can come up with policies that are abiding to each and every, or rather. Moving forward to the incremental theory, this theory is associated by this guy called Charles Lindblom. It involves limited charges, or rather it involves limited changes in addition to existing policies. Policymakers review a limited number of policy alternatives and implement changes in a series of small steps. Policymakers try to be rational and accept the past policies that satisfy them as legitimate and suffice to deal with the issue. Lindblom contends that incrementalism is the typical policymaking in a pluralist society. It is politically expedient because it is easier to reach an argument when it only involves limited modification of existing programs. Policymakers operate under conditions of uncertainties about the future. Incremental decisions tend to reduce the cost of risk and uncertainty. So guys, when it comes to the incremental theory, it is rather a conservative theory, and the reason as to why I'm saying it is conservative, it is because it relies on past policies, and then small steps are made to make changes, or rather limited changes to the existing theory. At the same time, this incremental theory is much more, or rather it takes care of the uncertainties that are to happen in the future, because it reduces the cost of risk and uncertainties, like I had previously said. Moving forward, guys, let me quote Simon, who in 1957 agreed with this Charles Lindblom theory, and this is what he said, and I quote, "Our world is a world of limited serial information processors dealing with complexity that for all practical purposes is infinite in comparison with their information powers. It is a world peopled by creatures of bounded rationality. Because we cannot simultaneously attend to everything that is potentially relevant, we must have processes that determine the focus of attention. End of quote. However, guys, this incremental theory also has some criticisms to it, and I'm going to look at 3 of the criticisms. And the first one, it says that it is too conservative to focus on the current order, hence it is a barrier to innovation. Like we said, it builds on previous theory. So the critics feel that this theory is too conservative for it to focus on what is happening at the moment and, innovation that can take place in the process of coming up with a new policy. Secondly, in crisis situations, incrementalism provides no guidelines for handling the task of decision. And lastly, it may discourage the search for and use of other readily available alternatives. Moving on to the rational choice theory. This theory is also known as public choice, social choice, or formal theory. It is based on economic principles such as cost-benefit analysis. And before we move forward, guys, this theory was actually brought about by economists. So, policymakers using this model are supposed to take the following steps. Before we look at the steps, I want to remind you guys that this rational choice theory is a very simple and it's quite easy to understand it. And the steps that are supposed to be taken, number 1, include identify all the value preferences currently existing in a society. Secondly, assign each value a relative weight. Thirdly, discover all the relevant policies available to complete these values. Fourthly, know all the costs and consequences of each alternative policy. Know all the costs and consequences of each alternative policy. And lastly, select the best alternative which is the most efficient in terms of cost and benefits of social values. This theory also deals with the construction of public policies that ensure better public choices. It is the opposite of incrementalism. And like you remember, we said incrementalism builds on previously existing